Somebody counted them. Open a guide to the gods of ancient Egypt, and you will often be handed a number, usually 12, and a tidy row of faces, one god to a job. The god of the dead, the god of writing, the god of the sky. 12 is a real number in the ancient world. It is the number of principal deities the Greeks had. It is not the number Egypt counted. The British Museum counts 9 at Heliopolis, and at Hermopolis they counted 8, from a completely different account of how the world began. And the British Museum's own list of Egyptian gods runs to 35, and it does not claim to be finished, because underneath it are the gods of single towns and the gods of particular plants and animals. There is a 12 in Egypt, as it happens. It is carved on a wall of the Temple of Khons at Karnak. 12 primordial forces standing beside the 8, the powers by which a creator god put the world together. It has nothing whatever to do with the 12 you were handed, and the tidy row of faces is worse than the number. Here is a peer-reviewed encyclopedia of Egyptology, describing Thoth, the god of writing and wisdom, saying that the plain labels we hang on him are, and this is its own word, reductionist. The more sources you collect on him, it says, the more the picture blurs. He is also a creator, also a warrior, also, in some texts, accused of theft. So, there is no list of 12. The gods do not stay in their boxes, and several of them turn into each other while you watch. And the most useful thing I can tell you about Egyptian religion is why nobody has ever been able to finish the list. Let us start with the 9 that Egypt actually counted. At Heliopolis, they counted 9, and the British Museum names them. Atum first, then his children Shu and Tefnut, then Geb and Nut, and then Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys, the Ennead. That is the group most people are reaching for when they reach for a number. Now watch it fail to hold still. Read the fullest surviving Heliopolitan account on the Bremner Rin papyrus and count the children of Geb and Nut, as that text gives them. Osiris, Horus, Seth, Isis, and Nephthys. That is 5, not 4. The extra is Horus the Elder, and he is simply there, in the fullest surviving telling, in a group whose entire identity is its number. The 9 is canonical. The membership is not, and upriver at Hermopolis, they were not counting 9 at all. At Hermopolis, the count was 8, and they were not gods with jobs. They were the conditions before anything existed. 4 pairs, male and female, Heh and Hehet, Kek and Keket, Nun and Nunet, and Nu and Nuet, infinite time, darkness, the primeval waters, and the void. That is not a pantheon. That is a description of nothing, carefully subdivided. Sometimes the 4th pair is swapped out, and Amun and Amunet stand in their place, and I am going to leave that exactly as unsettled as the scholarship leaves it. So already we have 2 numbers, from 2 cities, describing 2 different beginnings, and neither of them is 12. Here is the part that should end the roster format on its own. Egypt did not have one creation story with a few regional accents. It had 3 great systems, the Memphite, the Heliopolitan, and the Hermopolitan, and they did not sit politely side by side. They argued, and one of those arguments survives, cut into a slab of stone that is sitting in the British Museum right now. It is called the Shabaka stone. On it, the god Ptah of Memphis is said to bring Atum into being, and with Atum, Shu and Tefnut and the rest of the Heliopolitan Ennead, by the power of his creative thought and his word. Read that again. The creator god of one city is described creating the creator god of the other city. The peer-reviewed Encyclopedia of Egyptology says plainly what the text is doing. It is asserting the primacy of Ptah over Atum as the maker and of Memphis as the royal city above all others. That is theology being used as a municipal claim. Now, one honest caution, because it matters and because the older account of it is still repeated. This monument was long thought to copy a document from the Old Kingdom, which would make it very old indeed. That is no longer the consensus. The text as we have it is now generally considered later, written in a deliberately archaizing style, which is to say, written to look older than it is, which, if you think about it, is exactly what you would do if you were staking a claim. So where does a 12 exist in Egypt? It exists, and it is not the 12 that ends up on a thumbnail. Go to Karnak, to the Temple of Khons, and find the creation scene carved there in the last centuries before our era. The 8 are present, the pre-creation pairs from Hermopolis, and standing with them is a group of 12 other gods. They are described as the active forces by which the Creator accomplished the making of the cosmos. 12 mechanisms. The Egyptologist who described that scene photographed it himself, and his caption reads, 12 primordial deities at the Temple of Khons, Karnak. I want to be careful here, because this is a correction I had to make to my own script. My first draft of this episode said Egypt's groupings never come to 12. That was wrong, and the true version turned out to be more interesting than the error. Let us do what the roster videos do, properly, once, and watch what happens. Take Thoth, god of writing and wisdom. That is the card. Here is the peer-reviewed encyclopedia entry devoted to him. It gives you the labels first: god of wisdom, scribal god, divine scribe, lunar deity, divine vizier, and then it says something that ought to be printed at the top of every mythology video ever made. These functions set him apart from most other gods, and at the same time, they are reductionist. The more data and sources are collected, the entry says, the more Thoth's picture becomes blurred. He is also a cosmic deity, also a primeval creator, also a warlike divinity, and in the older sources, predominantly a slaughterer of hostile beings. He was accused of stealing from the offerings. One tradition has him complete the accidental killing of Osiris, and his origins. There are highly contradictory sources for how he came into being, and the specialist's verdict on all of them is that none can be treated as primary without reservation. Compare that to Osiris, on whom you can write a life story from beginning to end. Thoth, the same scholar says, does not allow for the establishment of such a mythological biography. There is a very large amount of Thoth. Even his name defeats us. The etymology is unexplained, possibly because it is old enough to predate written sources. We do not know what his name means. He does have a face, in fact two, an ibis, or a man with an ibis head, and separately a baboon. And when the Egyptians drew their most famous scene, the weighing of a human heart, it is Thoth standing there with the palette, writing down the result. If you watched our episode on that hall, you have already met him. He was the one taking notes. So the counting fails. Now watch the members themselves fail to stay separate, because this is the part that makes a roster physically impossible to draw. Here is the same encyclopedia survey of Egyptian creation, and I want you to listen to the names as they go past. Ra Atum, Atum Khepri, Ta Tatanan, Amun-Ra, Khnum-Ra, Hathor Nebet Hetepet. Every one of those is two gods written as one, and they are not nicknames, they are how the names appear in the texts. Amun gets identified with Ptah Tatanan in several inscriptions, and elsewhere he is identified with none. The primeval water itself. Go to the temple at Com Ombo and read the local texts, and they identify Haroeris, an older Horus, with Shu, and Sobek, the crocodile, with Geb. Those are two members of any roster you would care to draw being read in an actual Egyptian temple as two entirely different gods. The specialist who wrote that Thoth entry sums the whole phenomenon in one sentence, and it is the sentence that should be on the cover of every mythology book. In Egypt, a deity can take different shapes, or a certain shape can be taken by different deities. That runs in both directions at once, and you have already watched it happen on this channel. When we followed the goddess who nearly ended humanity, the story we were tracking did not begin with Sekhmet at all. It begins with Hathor, and Sekhmet is what Hathor becomes when she starts killing. One goddess, two names, and the name changes with her mood. That is not a special case. That is the ordinary condition. Now think about what a card does. A card needs a face, a name, and a job, held still long enough to be printed. Egyptian religion will not hold still that long, which brings us back to where we started, and to why nobody has ever finished this. The British Museum publishes what it calls, in its own words, its list of 35 ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. 35, not 12. And notice what the museum does not do. It does not present that as a census. It says, underneath the 35, that there were local gods who represented towns and minor gods who represented plants or animals. Towns, plants, animals, towns with their own gods and names that went into the ground with the people who used them. I am not going to give you a total. You will find one on the internet, a confident figure of more than 1,500, and I went looking for where it came from. It comes from one sentence, copied outward into place after place, and not one of the copies is a source I am willing to put in front of you. So the honest answer is that we do not know, and more than that, the question may not have an answer because the Egyptians were not keeping the kind of list that has a bottom line. Century after century, three great systems, and one of them arguing with another in stone. Gods who turn into other gods and back. 9 at Heliopolis, 8 at Hermopolis, 12 abstractions on a wall at Karnak, 35 on a museum's own list, and underneath all of it, the god of somebody's village. Every guide that hands you 12 faces in a row is not simplifying Egypt. It is describing a different religion, one that would have been much easier to draw and that nobody ever practiced. Next time, we go looking for one god in particular. Until then, keep the stories alive.